We have a pretty tough puzzle today to start off with because some people come in late. But yeah, before I start the class, I just want to do a shout out to Sasha Schaefer. Had a great tournament just now at Nationals. Um, Won first place. So congrats to him. Um, and pretty regular in this US chess school, so congratulations. And yeah, so this position is black to play. So we're up a piece, and we have to figure out how to uh, play in this position. Can obviously take the rook, have other options. We're getting attacked. How would you handle this position? Oh, also congratulations to Sarthak for getting NM. Also shout out to him and to Sasha for winning national championship and maybe also making NM. We'll see what the rating report says. It's maybe close. Um, um, so again, it's black to move here. And what would you play? So it's black to move, and what would you do? Try to calculate the best you can. Give as detailed as an answer as you can. Of course, the critical move is bishop takes c1, right? That's the one that should be checked. Well, this one is not from nationals, but some of them might be from nationals. Um, Black to move here. Mhm. Mhm. Okay, so far we have some interesting answers. So some candidate moves people came up with are rook h7, bishop c8. Those are pretty good ones. We will review that. But let's actually restructure the question. Let's focus for now on bishop c1. Let's try to evaluate bishop c1. What do you think happens after bishop c1? If both sides play it perfectly. This is a pretty difficult line, so let's try our best. Uh-huh. That move, okay. Hmm. What kind of hmm. Bishop c1 is draw. Well, the question is how. It's a pretty complicated line. No worries. Um, okay. Bishop c1, page 3. This line. Okay. All right, yeah, we'll look at that. That's kind of on the right track, but okay, okay. All right, so let's look at bishop c1 first. So first, I guess first question is, what do you think is the best move for white after bishop c1? Is it knight d6, is it rook h3, or is it knight g7? I guess that's the first question. Yeah, so the best move is rook h3. So if we go knight g7, knight g7 is not so clear. King takes g7, rook g3, bishop here, h4, bishop c8. Here black's doing fairly well. Black will play rook a5, because right now black's up 2 pieces. You'll get one back, but the attack is kind of fading away here. So this line kind of is not so clear. I mean, black is better. And that line, knight g7, king g7, rook g3, bishop g5. This line, black is better. Knight d6, I'm guessing also bishop g5. Yeah, bishop g5, rook h3. And now you have a defense rook e7. Because without rook e7, actually white is winning. But rook e7, rook h8, king g7, yeah, black wins actually here. Up too much material. So, but after bishop c1, we have rook h3, right, which is the critical test. So in order to be able to play bishop c1, you actually have to calculate all 3 lines, right? You have to make sure you see this line where you're doing okay, that you're winning here, or at least you're safe, right? So that's one line. This line is also pretty safe for black. Black's at least not worse, but maybe better. And then there's rook h3. Now, if the rook h3, what should black do here? Because the line doesn't just end here. Black could still fight here. So what is the move with which black fights? Yeah, rook g2, of course, right? Rook g2. Because yeah, if you go rook g8, it's lost. Rook h7. right? That's important. Yeah, here there's no way to stop mate. So rook takes g2 is the move. Now here, what should white do? What should white do here in this position? That's the next question. We have three legal moves. Which one do we play? So the answer is actually king takes g2, because if you play king h1, black actually is winning here. How? Yes, very good. c5, and then rook h8 met with rook g8 check, right? So yes, so that is winning. And what about if king f1? So here we play rook g8, and now black wins, because you have to rook here, 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 rook e1, right? Black wins this. So actually white needs to take on g2. Now black must go queen d5, right? Only move. And now this is this endgame we need to evaluate, right? What happens in this endgame. So what do you think white's best option here is? Yes, rook h7 is the correct move, right? Um, if we play knight d6, that's not as good because of this, king e7, and the knight on b7 is kind of misplaced, right? Almost going to be trapped. And rook h8, king here, rook there, does not work for white. And here we have king e7 or something. So that does not work. So the correct win move is rook h7. Because now rook a7, the problem is that after something like b4, black is paralyzed. This is like a terminal pin you can't get out of. So you will eventually lose that piece. And white has just this pawn pushing, right? Like, so black's in big trouble. Black is lost here. Um, if you go bishop c8, you can do this, which is black's best option actually. Like knight a4, and then the king gets back and stuff, right? And then, okay, like maybe this is probably the best black can do. Black is like fighting for a draw here, but should maybe make it. And finally, there's bishop c6. And here, white has an important move, which is the point of the whole line. So white should play what move here? Exactly. Very good. Rook c7. Right. And so the point of this whole puzzle problem was to see up to rook c7. Because without rook c7 at the very end, black is better, right? You see the next move after that is minus 1.2, right? So without all of these moves, um, rook h7 and rook c7, black would be better, right? But here, the answer is black's actually fighting for a draw in this position. So yeah, and of course, yeah, rook takes g2 is king takes g2 is forced, right? Which is important uh because of these lines. Bishop a6, rook g1. So ultimately, bishop takes c1 leads to approximately a draw, where white's the one pressing, right? Black, black has to be the one accurate. So the best move is rook h7. So nicely done to those who played rook h7, avoided the rook. Here black is better in this position a little bit. And bishop c8 is like second best. White could take here though. Now you cannot take because 96. Uh, so yeah, basically here king g7, queen c6, and then the rook is hanging. So here, queen c2, rook c8, rook c3, and then in the end you get some weird endgame. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, 4 pawns for a piece. So yeah, should be a draw with perfect play. White's pawns are not that impressive. Black's queen and bishop are pretty good, so should be a draw. But yeah, the real point, of course, was to calculate this till the end and see it all the way until here. Uh, sorry, queen d5 takes rook h7, and then hopefully see this point, right? Or maybe you just intuitively realize that. But the thing is, like, ideally you want to at least be able to see rook takes g2, right, and at least calculate to that endgame. Because the thing is, like, if rook g2 works, then bishop c1 might be winning, right? Like, it's one of those moves that's like, if it works, it might be winning. But it's good to see that there's rook h7 and rook c7, right? Because then black is actually not winning. So I think very interesting problem. All right, so let's take a look at another one. This is from my game. I don't remember if I showed it here before or not. So if I did, you can let me know. This is black to play. What would you do here? If I showed it already, let me know, because I sometimes forget which positions I shown before. So it's black to play. What would you do? This is from one of my game against Kallenstein. I'm up a pawn, but black has compensation. How would you play this position? Well, it looks like people haven't seen it before based on what people are typing. So So this is an interesting position. A lot of interesting answers I see here. Um, all right, so f6 is a strong move here, but I think most people haven't given the right follow-up yet. So let's first go over some other tempting options. Some people are giving the exchange sack, which is very logical. The exchange sack. So let's look at that first. If exchange sack, what should white play here? What should white play here? All right, so that's I got it correct. Rook C1 is correct move, yeah. Yeah, you just want to get the open file actually. Um yeah, don't let them play Rook C6, try to go Rook C8. It's kind of like you're invading on that file. Um Sample lines can be like this, or Rook B6, Rook C8, King here, Rook C7. Yeah, white's gonna be very annoying with the rook on the seventh. Now maybe f4, 5, maybe f6 could be an idea. I think everything else is not as clear. Like rook g4, bishop takes b3 is like not that clear. Um, like rook e5, but then b6. Yeah, or even f5. Um, or yeah, what else was people gave? H4, yeah, probably like rook b6. Rook e5, probably f6, rook c6. So yeah, rook c1 makes the most sense, right? Just get control over the open file. Um, so yeah, so white is a little better here, but I think practically the rook sacrifices would have been interesting. It would have been better actually than what Kallichstein did in the game. But having said that, there was something better than sacking the exchange. And the best line is actually f6. F6, white should probably go rook g4, right? Everything else kind of, the rook is not that well placed. E5, f4. This is what I was counting on. And during the game, I did see what black could play, and I wasn't sure what happened to that position, so I was happy that he didn't play it. He was kind of low on time. Here, what should black play here? Um, Yeah, bishop f3 I'm not so sure about because rook h4, I'm not sure if there's a follow-up, but e4 is strong. E8 takes e4, and now the best move is this. I mean, if we take here, then knight a5 is not so clear. Um, but bishop takes c4, pawn takes. Rook d6 is okay. Rook c4 is also okay. And then you have d3, d2. And here black actually has a lot of counterplay. And yeah, position is around equal here because d2, rook c1 is a threat, right? So essentially black is definitely fine. All right, so going back to the position. So rook e1. So my opponent played b6. So we covered rook d6, we covered f6. Was there any other move suggestions that were mentioned besides bishop takes c4 actually is similar to what happened in the game. So let's look at b6. Was there any move I didn't cover? I don't think so. But there's like 30 plus students, so I might miss it. So forgive me if I missed the suggestion. But after b6, what do you think white should do? That's the next question. All right, so let's look at some ideas. So first point is like d7 is a very interesting move, which we'll look at in a second. So the first point is like taking here does not work. If we try to do this right away, then yeah, they can either go king f8 or rook e6, right? So that won't work. So if we're gonna play d7, it makes sense to do it immediately to try to threaten rook e5, rook d5. Um, Now rook c1 does not work because rook takes d6. Then we just lose a pawn for nothing. Um, I saw f4 or h4 mentioned, but okay, then f6. Um, then king f7, then we try to take the pawn. Doesn't seem to do a lot for our position. So Samuel Gu looks like has the right idea. Um, Hold on, let me see. But before we get to that, yeah, let's look at D7 first, because D7 is very tempting. So now the question is, what should black do against D7? So what should black do here? Um, so bishop takes c4, we'll get to it in a second. Yeah, bishop takes c4 is one of those things that white wants, and I'll explain a little bit later. It kind of like it's actually a move I want to induce black to play. Um, well, we'll look at that in a second. The bishop takes c4 thing. But for now, um, yeah, for now, let's see. So here, the point is like we can't go here, right? f6 because of rook d5. You could go king f8, but white's still a bit better here. I think after rook g4. So the best move is actually rook d7. It seems like we can't do it because of 95, but then we follow the Shankland rule. We see if we can do it anyway. And we could play f6 here. By the way, even sacking the exchange, the version here is not too bad for black because you have like rook c3 threat and stuff like that. So f6, knight takes c6, f takes g5, knight takes d4, and then g4. And then the idea is to try to go king f7, king f6, e5, and then like d3 and b3 are kind of weak, right? And black is gonna get a lot of compensation here. Positions around equal. Now in the game I played something else. I played the move rook g4. Now, why did I play rook g4? Because I wanted to force bishop takes c4. Now, the question is, why is this so good for me? Well, the thing is, in this position, white has a much better pawn structure. Black has two weaknesses, right? Which need guardianship. And white's structure is healthy. And as a result, black's rooks are tied down to guarding those pawns, right? And because of the difference in rook activity and pawn structure, white is actually much, much better. It's actually more than +1. I think some engines might even give it +2 or higher. Yeah, something like rook g4, f4, king f2. That would be the best option, yes. Because yeah, black's just paralyzed, like black's stuck, confined to defending these weaknesses, right? So anything related to bishop takes c4 is always going to be very favorable for white, right? Because of the difference in rook activity. Um, so I played rook g5. Maybe it's a little less accurate, but okay, my opponent was in time pressure, so he kind of let me get what I wanted anyway. Um, Here I ended up playing g4. We ended up exchanging pair of rooks. Still, I'm like much better. And now we have to make another decision. How do we respond to g takes f4? Yeah, don't just give one move. Give follow up because it's pretty complex question. Oh, g5 and h4. That's a very enterprising solution, but I think after h4 I can go king f6 maybe, but we'll take a look. All right, so let's first go over the non-captures. So some people said h4. H4 is an interesting creative move. But this move, okay, I can take here. And now after this e5, that's black's gonna get counterplay with like rook e6, king g7. Black's technically up a pawn, right? So that's not as ideal. So king f4, white should probably play, but then okay, something like rook d8 and then g3, um rook g8. Yeah, black gets counterplay. Yeah, no, it's not h4. I mean, h4 is interesting, but it's not the best move. Um, yeah, because black does is able to defend here. But it is very interesting idea. Because I guess the point is after this now h4 there's en passant, right? So the idea is to get the pawn there before en passant, right? So it's an interesting idea. But well, just because you got the first move, it's not, you have to see it a little bit further. So the next thing we'll review is g5 and h4. Yeah, and I guess king h4, king f4, maybe there's some, but yeah, I think just this. And yeah, I was thinking rook d8. Like black has to be fine in many ways here. Um, White has this huge center now. Yeah, now black's the one who plays for a win. So yes, it's mainly between g takes f5 and king takes f4. Now king takes f4 would be met with this, and now either I'm going to get counterplay with e4, t3, or I'm going to get king here, king f5. In both cases, black narrowly has enough for a draw. Now, it looks actually like g takes f5, e5 might be a problem for white, right? Because, okay, if takes king f4 is easy enough, but there's e5. And yeah, king e4, but now f3, right? Black can still be a little bit resilient. And so I needed to make sure I calculate this to make sure I'm like happy with this position. So how should white continue here? I mean, h4 also wins, and after f2, rook b1, but rook b2 is the easiest. Because if h4 here, rook b1 is like not as easy. But yeah, this is also winning. But rook b2 is what I played. Um my opponent played rook c6. What should white do next? So the thing with rook f2 is that after rook f2, here we have rook h7. Yeah, and here actually black gets a good amount of counter. H3, rook g7. And this is actually a draw, right? So I figured rook f2 is, super premature. The thing is, black cannot do anything besides just going back and forth. So I just played here. Yeah, the other position I think is like at least black gets the rook active, right? So maybe white has some tries, but it's not so easy, right? So h4, rook d6, and now I played h5. Try to go h6, king g5. Um, yeah, because if he keeps waiting, I'm just gonna keep pushing this h pawn. So eventually he had to try this, and now how should white win here? So yeah, rook f2 is very important, right? Try to go rook f2, rook f2. And here he actually resigned because I'm just basically taking everything and I'm bringing king to e5. But after king e5, actually, suddenly it's black who is playing for a win after rook f6. Because if, let's say, you go king d4, black can play what move? Unexpectedly. Exactly. King f4. Nasty. Suddenly, black is the one playing for a win, right? So we have to be careful till the very end in endgames, right? And yeah, now I'm about to show you some endgame examples that happened at nationals. All right, let's start with this one. Black to play. So the question is evaluate queen takes e5. Um, evaluate queen takes e5. Do we take on e5 with the queen or do we do something else? All right, so I think most people are correct, yes. But this master playing black, he got it wrong. Yeah, basically FE, Queen of 2, these are all correct. No, Naranyan was white. Uh the other guy. I don't know who he is actually, but 2211 though is a master, so I don't know if he's from. No, I don't know. I think it might be UCF. I'm not to be honest, I'm not sure. Could actually be FIDE. Yeah, maybe it is FIDE. Um yeah, I'm not sure. Um well, either way. You know, really very interesting. Okay, well, whatever. Yeah, so either way, that was a mistake. Even though on paper black has an extra pawn, the problem is black's pawns are bad, but that's actually not the only factor. The main factor is the white's king gets more active first, and they have more spare tempi. So something like this. Um, now white played c5, and now black played e4. I mean, if here king e4 will win, right? Um, so e4, king takes here. Um, and black played king of 6. How does white win here? I mean, maybe Venkatesh's opponent thought that this might be drawish, but white wins here. How does white win here? All right, so let's see what you guys got. Okay, so the correct move is f4. Correct move is f4. The only winning move, but though everything else draw. So yeah, again, pawn endgames are very precise, right? We gotta be calculating very accurately. If we go g4, then e5, and then king can just go e6, f6 forever, right? Just easy draw. Um, if we play g3, e5 again, um, right? So actually, the whole point is to prevent e5, sort of, right? But yeah, there are still some questions, right? So let's say we go f4. And black played e5 anyway, actually. How does white win here? See, I'm wondering if maybe we have to give black more credit. Maybe the black player, he thought it's a draw, this position all along, and just miscalculated all of white's ideas. So that could be it. But no, white's winning actually in many ways. Yeah, here white's winning. I thought f5 is the easiest, but yeah, apparently this also wins. Yeah. Um, yeah, and here white wins because of the outside passed pawn, right? Here, and then you go g3, h4. So here we win because of the outside passed pawn. Yeah, e5, king e4. Um, yeah, so it is winning in every line, but f4 was very important. And c5 was also, by the way, very important. Because if you play here and here, um, yeah, so somehow we're in Zugzwang here. So I guess the point is like, yeah, so if we go here, what's the difference? Let me try to figure it out. Um, yeah, so if we go here, g6, g4, we are able to penetrate here. Okay, so let's see. So if we play this instead, king f6, like so let's say g4. Oh, okay. Yeah, we just like wait here forever. King d7, king e7. And with the pawn on c5, wait, why can't we do it there? Oh, because he goes king d6. So if the pawn's on c5, this is winning, right? So imagine the pawn's on c5 for white. White is winning. He goes king e5, h4, h5. But here he goes king d6, and he's controlling this square, right? And this square. So as a result, this becomes unclear. It's a draw, but like very trick. Wait, yeah. Well, here white would even lose, right? But um. Yeah, it's a very fine line. Yeah, actually it's a very complicated pawn end game, right? So it's possible that maybe c5 was overlooked, right? Or maybe f4 was overlooked. Something was overlooked, right? Like because the thing is like white's not winning in every line, right? So it's not that obvious. But there's two main factors, right? One is the black's pawn structure is bad. Two is that white has like more space, reserve tempi. And three, I think the most important factor is that the king gets to e4. So at the very minimum, white's not risking anything, right? Like black can't really win here. There's no chance black is winning in the pawn endgame. Right? So it can only be either a draw or white's losing, right? Sorry, either a draw or white's winning. So then for black, it was not very practical to go for this line, right? Because essentially this is like fine for black, right? Um, it's just equal. In fact, yeah, also it was possible to play queen takes f2. Uh, yeah, so there was like Blacks has a fine position, right? So there is no reason to have gone for this pawn endgame where, well, it's only white might be winning if you miscalculate, but there's like no way black can be winning, right? So it's also like a bad practical decision by Santiago de Jesus. All right, we have time for maybe one more example. This is Tanya's position. What should black play here? This is Tanya white against Chloe Gao. Um, all right, let's see what you guys put here. Um, so did you guys trade rooks? Okay, yeah, so trading rooks here is the right decision. Yeah, trading rooks is the right decision. Um, yeah, because if you trading rooks is a draw, but if you don't, you're worse. For example, b6. Uh, because if you play b6, I play rook a2, and with the rook endgame, I can kind of torture you for a bit. Um, with the 3-on-2. Yeah, so everything else you're kind of suffering. But with the rook trade, your king's very active. So again, like another example of you sort of like in a bad pawn endgame because of pawn structure, right? But even though there's a bad pawn structure, the black king's very active, and that allows black to make a draw um, with some accurate play. Of course, yeah, don't go b5 because of g5, and then that would put white and black in Zugzwang, right? So you have to be careful, but at the end of the day, um, yeah, even b5 would still be a draw, but Chloe played this, and now, yeah, Tanya had to make a draw, right? Because if c4 then takes, so yeah, so it just becomes a draw. So there are actually more interesting king and pawn endgames that happen at nationals, which I wanted to potentially show. But I guess we'll go over them next week in a week on the 19th. The rest of the examples and maybe some more because I figured pawn endgames are always good to review because I saw a lot of misplayed pawn endgames in the nationals and usually pawn endgames are like very good to train for calculation because they're very exact. You can't really rely on intuition anymore. You have to like rely on calculation. So, alrighty, well, let me open the chat for everyone. Congrats to everyone who did well at the nationals and who recently broke master um, And yeah, so see everyone on next week, hopefully. All right, bye everyone.